Welcome back, everyone, to Serious Coin, the podcast where we have rich conversations about wealth. I'm Kelly Willis Green, and today is part 2 of my conversation with Jennifer Risher. Jen is an investor, philanthropist, speaker, and the author of We Need to Talk, a memoir about wealth. The book explores Jen's personal story of coming into money during the dot-com era and the impact it had on her identity, her relationships, and sense of place in the world. In part 1 of my interview last week, Jen and I talked about the emotional complexities of money and how she initially felt shame and a desire to keep her wealth hidden. But through the exercise of writing her book and with the passing of time and experience, Jen has moved into a more comfortable relationship with her money. And in this episode, we talk about her path to becoming an engaged, values-based investor and philanthropist, and how she wants to inspire other women to step into their power around money. I loved our conversation. I know you will too. Have a listen. I'm interested in how you invest and what your learning process has been around that, because particularly for women, statistics are that this is not an area in which women feel supremely confident.
Yeah.
But I think you've really come into your own through a process of time. And so I'm interested in, where did you start in terms of your approach to investing? What was your path to learning, and where are you today?
Way, way back in time, my dad helped me think about investing. And when I was right out of college, I did some investing, but that was really the last time I thought about it. We came into so much money. And then when we started to meet with our advisor, I would often just kind of sit back and let David drive the questions. And I think this happens for a lot of women, because then suddenly I was hearing phrases and terms and jargon that I didn't know what that meant. And I maybe had the courage to ask the question once, but then when I didn't understand, I didn't ask again. And I think women unfortunately do this to ourselves a lot, where we feel like there's stupid questions. I don't want to ask a stupid question. But really, if you don't know something, it's okay. Too often women, especially around numbers and money and finance, like very stereotypical, but these gender roles still play a part in our lives.
They do.
And so I was one of the very typical women who would meet with our advisor and nod and not ask the questions when I didn't understand. So it really was writing the book, getting the book published, getting out and starting to talk about wealth and money and the emotional piece, and then thinking, wait a second, what am I doing with our money? Where is it? What's it doing? I don't want to be that person just nodding and allowing it to, because I recognize money has power, and there's power there. And I think that's another challenge for women, to step into our power and to use it with purpose and acknowledge it and have the courage to make decisions around it. So I joined this group, which I really appreciated. It was called Women with Capital, and there was a cohort of us, and it was all about learning about our portfolio. So it's like, let's look at where our money is. What are the asset classes we're invested in? What is an investment? And there were no stupid questions. It was a bunch, 8 of us women together, learning together in community. And that was a real catalyst for me. It really did give me the courage I needed to step forward. And it started with me going to our advisor and saying, okay, look, I don't want to be in anything that is polluting our worlds. I don't want to be in any gas. I don't want to be in tobacco. I don't want to be in prisons. I want to get out of anything that's doing harm. I also want to do things that actively invest in ways that are rewarding companies that are doing good. Like, how many women are on the board? So I started there, and kind of getting out of harm is interesting, but I think even more interesting was saying, okay, how do I take my money and really use it in a way that creates the world that I want to live in? What is my purpose with, how can I use this money, that this tool I have, that I'm so fortunate to have, to really change the world in ways I want to see it changed? I want to create a world that's more equitable, racially, gendered, economic, equitable world. And what does that mean? And how do I do that? And I learned that women get 2% of venture capital dollars. So most venture capital dollars is being driven by white men. And so there's a a huge segment of our population that is not getting seen. There's incredible talent out there in women and women of color, LGBTQ folks who are not getting invested in, and therefore products and services that serve at least half of our population aren't being created, aren't being funded. And I want to change that. So, really looking at like women and women of color in particular, and women who, because I don't have a lot of knowledge, I have just enough knowledge, I feel like I want to invest in women who are then fund managers. So they're then determining what to invest in. So, and, women's healthcare, that is really underfunded. It's a huge market opportunity because it's not something that men think of. They don't have the same perspective. They don't have the same needs and desires and experiences. So it's like, wow, there's a huge market opportunity here. It makes social and financial sense to invest in women's healthcare. And there I found an incredible woman, Black woman, who is raising a fund, Steel Sky Ventures, for women's healthcare, for access, care, and outcomes for women. And I invested with her. I felt like, okay, she is then going to take that investment and deploy it in ways that I can't even see. As a Black woman, she has a different perspective. She's looking at the world through a different lens, and she's incredibly smart, and she has experience as an entrepreneur herself. And I've invested in 4 different women fund managers who are first-time fund managers, and I feel that's exciting. It's been really exciting to meet these women, to hear about their story, to see the way they're approaching investing and raising money. And it's all new to me, and it's all very exciting. And I have so much more to learn. And I've also made a couple of angel investments. So it's very fun when I realized, when I was thinking, am I interested in investing? Not really. It all felt like numbers and shuffling money around. And when I recognized the meaning behind it, the change I could make with my money, the impact I can have, that's when it got really interesting.
So many questions. Women in Capital, is that a self-formed group, or is that an organization that has chapters? Is it sponsored by somebody?
I will give a big plug to Barbara Pierce, who started this, and she has run a number of cohorts. I was part of her group in 2021 for 6 weeks. We met over Zoom for a couple hours every week. She's getting women smart about their money, getting women to trust themselves, making sure that we're learning and we're thinking about where our money is invested and how we're giving. And she saw there's women out there who have power that they're not accessing or thinking about. And I mean, I just now was talking to a friend. I was saying, you are so smart in all aspects of your life, your work. She's a big horseback rider, and it's like, you need to get smart about your money. Mm-hmm. Her husband is in finance. So she's like, yeah, I think it's like trying to get women and smart about their money as they are about other things in their lives, whether it's running a home and being a great mom or being out in the workforce. We have the power to make a difference, if not just for ourselves and our families, then for our world. And I love that she is helping to empower women. I also now want to give a big plug to this new organization called The New Table. It's been started by a group called How Women Lead, and their mission is to get 10,000 women investing. They're just starting out. I think they're going to be successful, but I love this. And I'm seeing this in other aspects as I kind of am in this space of like women really kind of stepping forward, because by 2030, we're going to have control of 70% of the money in the world. Trillions of dollars are coming to us as women. And if we're not educated and we don't feel confident and we're not smart about how we're thinking about using our money or investing our money or asking about how much we should be making. I mean, we need to step into our power around money.
Yeah. Even if we choose not to do it ourselves and we delegate it. I always say you shouldn't abdicate. It's okay to delegate, but don't abdicate to anybody, including your partner.
I love that.
As you've learned through investing, we all make mistakes. I know I certainly have. My rule, and I sometimes break it still, is don't invest in anything you don't understand, no matter who else is in it or how good it sounds. What's been the biggest investment lesson that you've had to learn?
I do invest in things I don't understand because my thesis is more around the person, the fund manager or the head of this company or the product designer, if that person is someone with a track record who I trust, who's smart, who answers questions honestly and authentically, who admits to mistakes, and who, like, if I get a good sense of someone, even if I don't really quite understand that scientific business she's driving, I'll invest. To me, it's more about that person.
I think that is an investment skill, being a good judge of character.
I think so too.
And I think that sometimes that is a skill set that's underrated.
I'm going to get back on my woman's soapbox because I think what happens is the old men's boys network. This is how investments are normally made, they're investing in each other. They're at the club. Oh, he's starting this business. Let's invest in it. Men are more likely to talk about money and throw around big numbers. And so women have a hard time breaking into that club. And that's part of why venture capital, it's all controlled and owned by this network of people, because people do invest in other people, most likely people like themselves. So if it's all kind of within a certain segment of our population, that's a problem.
So we've talked about spending and investing. Let's talk a little more about giving money away and that's certainly a subject that's close to my heart as well. And you've become quite passionate about philanthropy. When did you start thinking about charitable giving? Was it something that you grew up with, the practice of giving in your home, or what point did you start thinking about it?
I didn't grow up with that practice or that habit, or I think there is sort of a sense that charity's for chumps was sort of the way my dad thought about things. Like, he was very frugal and careful, and he felt like, oh, people are out to take advantage of me. That was sort of his attitude.
That scarcity mindset.
This scarcity mindset of like seeing someone in the street asking for money. It's like, oh, they're just taking advantage. So that was kind of a prevailing sentiment, as well as the fact that, did we have any extra money to give? It really wasn't until I got to Microsoft, and Microsoft gave a small percentage. If you contribute to United Way, a small percentage of your paycheck, they'd match it. So I did that. And then when I had this money and I saw people around me who were more philanthropic, and I started to give back to places that had served me. I think one of my first big gifts was $1,000 to Planned Parenthood. And then, David and I began to give, and it was sort of the giving back to places that we gave to NPR, I gave to my mother's group, which is organized by a nonprofit. And then our kids went to an independent school, and that was sort of the next layer of education as I recognized, oh, wow, we're paying an incredible amount to send them to school, but it doesn't really cover the cost of the school. And so being asked by the school for big amounts of money was a shock. And around this time, this is when the girls were really little, our financial advisor came to us and said, this might be a good year to put money aside and put it into a donor-advised fund. And so a donor-advised fund allows you to take your tax break up front, and then you put the money into the fund and you can give it away over time.
Right.
But it offsets some other event that was happening that year. This is one of the examples of not really being aware of all that was going on in our portfolio, because it's like, okay, we did this thing, and then I had this money sitting in a donor advised fund, and I didn't know what to do with it. I wanted to be philanthropic. I remember, and I had little kids, and I remember kind of going up online and looking around at nonprofits. I felt overwhelmed, and how was I going to do giving right? So there was this sense of that going on as well.
Right.
Fast forward to today, I realize this is still an issue for many people. I've moved way beyond that, I'm happy to say, but people do feel overwhelmed. And I think philanthropy has been a little bit over intellectualized, and people fear getting it wrong, and that keeps them stuck. And now I just try and send out the message that you can't get this wrong. There's so many great organizations out there, people doing good work. Figure out what you care about and dive in, get started. You're not going to get it wrong. You're going to be giving to someone who's dedicating their lives to serving a population or solving one of our country's big problems. The chances are very low that you're going to get it wrong.
I think you're absolutely right, though. I think people do get stuck. And I think particularly high achievers are used to doing things well. And this giving money away is new. And when you've got people like Warren Buffett saying giving money away is easy, giving money away well is fiendishly difficult, then you think, okay, well, yeah, there must be an art and a science to this, and I want to know what it is and do it well. And it is intimidating. What resources helped you, or what advice do you have someone who is stuck?
I think there's those messages like that Warren Buffett message, or there's messages of like, there's some bad actors out there, or how are you going to ensure every single dollar is well spent? And there needs to be a better PR campaign around giving, because I just know of so much good work being done. And I think what changed for me is like my husband co-founded and led a nonprofit. Mm-hmm. So he was doing work, and his nonprofit was to get books into the hands of the kids in developing world, where he had a digital platform for books. So he was in Ghana and Kenya and working with the local publishers and authors to deliver books about the kids who were reading those books. So kids were reading, Kofi Got Malaria, or books that were relevant to their lives, and it got them reading. A reader has a more prosperous life. So his nonprofit was all about getting kids reading throughout the developing world. He's now in the U.S. He's working with kids in Appalachia and in the Bronx. And so
amazing.
I've seen him doing incredible work and reaching millions and millions of kids and their families, and also fundraising, and how hard it is to have to fundraise constantly and prove your work. And every time you're out there fundraising and proving your work and delivering the data and showing you're not doing the work.
Yeah.
So it's incredibly time consuming and frustrating. And the better he does at serving kids, the more money he has to raise. So
right.
It's, more success you have, the more you have to raise. So that really opened my eyes to nonprofits and fundraising, and really allowed me to say, oh, what do I care about? And it was a lot of reaching out to local organizations that I cared about and giving unrestricted grants, 3-year grants, just feeling like I'm a partner with you. And in fact, I think we really need to turn philanthropy on its head. We're just a small part of, solving a problem as a donor. The real work happens every day that people are out there working at a nonprofit. So I think we should be begging people to take our money, because they are the ones really doing the work. And I'm more and more in belief that people, who are closest to problems are the ones that should be making the decisions, not people with the money. We're pretty distant from some of the real struggles that are going on in our country. We need to be trusting and moving money to people on the ground who are really suffering and can see the way out. I mean, I just love what Mackenzie Scott has done, how she's moved money, big money, very quickly to areas of the world or in our country that need it most in terms of economic inequity that exists.
Maybe there's a role too, you mentioned the word earlier, partnership, because some of the people with money also have really great ideas and business sense and ways of approaching problem solving. And can that not also be an asset that's brought to bear to a charity?
I think that's what's been happening in the world, where someone with wealth has been successful in business, and so they believe that they can drive change with the money that they have. It might be starting backwards. We have to look at what's really going on in our world, and who knows better than the people living it with the experience. Mm-hmm. Starting there, not with the person who's been successful in business, or with the person who has the money and has a great idea, or who has a pet project. I really think we've been looking at it backwards. We need to take a look at what's really going on in our world and start there and go the other direction.
Jen and her husband David are generous philanthropists through their Donor Advised Fund, otherwise known as a DAF. And during COVID, in 2020, they wanted to inspire more giving from other DAF holders. And so they launched a concept they call Half My DAF. And that has moved millions of dollars to the nonprofit sector in the past 3 years. I asked Jen how that came about.
That was born out of COVID, really. I mean, what a time. I think back, it was 4 years ago, 3 years ago. Time is warped. It was March, April of 2020. And I mean, the world was really kind of falling apart. No one knew what was going to happen. The market was dropping. My husband was, he could feel fundraising drying up. Like foundations that had earmarked money for him were saying, well, we're not sure now. There was so much uncertainty. And yet he was working harder than ever, as was every other nonprofit. There was so much need. So we were personally thinking, okay, we're going to accelerate the giving that we were already doing and get more money to nonprofits. And then we were sitting in our backyard, just what can we do? This is the moment. We need to do something. And we should just give to a bunch of nonprofits. That's kind of where we started. And how are we going to do that? How are we going to decide? And then it was like, we also were very aware of money just sitting in donor advised funds. And David had been looking at that money. We'd both been looking at it like, how do we unstick this money? There was $120 billion sitting in donor advised funds. So we looked at that money again and said, okay, maybe we can incent people to start activating their donor advised fund. So we came up with this idea of, we put up our own money. We put up $1 million and said, anyone who commits to spending down half the money that's sitting in their donor advised fund by September 30th, give wherever you want, just start giving, you'll be eligible for a batch from us. So that was our concept. And that was, even so, you talk about being comfortable with money. So even then I was like, oh, am I really just going to be out there saying we're giving away $1 million? It's so exposed. It's so vulnerable. What kind of backlash are we getting? So there was a moment of pause. And so there's also a moment of pause thinking, okay, my husband and I are going to work together on this. How's that going to be? What's that going to be like? But in both cases, it's been really very, very positive because we started by creating a website together. We started talking to people, reaching out to friends and reaching out to people. David had contacts through World Reader with the press, and we launched Giving Tuesday in May and made the announcement, and it was kind of amazing. We got a lot of amazing press. We talked to the Washington Post, to Bloomberg. We were on NPR. We were in Chronicle of Philanthropy and Giving Compass.
Like, you made some waves.
We made some waves, which made me very concerned because if we were the most creative things going on in philanthropy, that was a problem. Like, wow, what's going on here? And I think stepping forward as a donor and doing something as the donor was unusual. And then also unusual was we weren't showing up with an agenda other than helping other people give to where they wanted to give and just accelerating that movement. So just saying, give wherever you want, as long as it doesn't promote hate speech or gun violence, give where you want, just start giving. So inspiring that giving. And that year, so we moved $8.6 million from DAFs to nonprofits through Half My DAF, which was really exciting. Even more exciting was kind of the conversations that were happening with people telling us, oh, this is the nudge I needed. I'm sitting around the dinner table with my adult kids. We're talking about our values, where we want to give. And that was exciting.
That's fantastic. And I'm curious, when you had those conversations with donors, why was the money stuck in those DAFs? Why did they need this nudge? What did you learn?
So we learned a lot. So mostly we learned that, there's kind of 4 reasons that people aren't activating their DAF. And they're very human reasons. First is, I forgot I had a DAF. And this is because a financial advisor, it's sort of like what happened with us, at some point said, this is a good year to put money into a DAF. It happens, and then no one ever goes back and reminds you that there's money sitting there. So that's one reason. There's also the reason we talked about earlier of like, I want to give, I'm ready to give, but I'm overwhelmed. I don't know where to start. And this fear, that's a very real reason of people not giving. They're scared they're going to get it wrong. And that's because of all this lore out there that you have to make sure that you're doing it smart. Who doesn't want to do it smart? Who doesn't want to have an impact? Who doesn't want, of course, you want these things. You want to be smart about how you're giving, but not at the detriment of actually giving.
Right.
It's much better. What's not smart is just not giving. Then you're really not smart. And this is where I do think joy is important to remember, because it's like, it should be joyful. Figure out what you care about and just start. Don't be so scared. You're not going to get it wrong. You'll be doing good. There's also, I'm busy, I'm at work, I don't have time to think about this. And this kind of dovetails with the other, because it's like you feel like, oh, I have to do a lot of research. I got to get it right. So I don't have time to do that right now. So I'm too busy. I'll get to my philanthropy when I'm older. It's a learning process. You start now so that when you are older, you're much more knowledgeable. You've figured things out. You know what works for you. You know what feels right. And you know where you want to be giving. So it doesn't take that much to figure out one place you want to give, and just start with a donation. See how it feels. Get to know the executive director there. Get to know someone who's working there. Maybe go volunteer there or not. I mean, dabble in this thing and get a sense of it. Don't wait. And then the fourth reason really, and this again is very human, it's like, well, if I give it away, I don't have it anymore. And even though it's really no longer yours, it's money that you've received a tax break on, it's still something that people like to look at and kind of move around and think about. And the answer there is like, wow, problems are not getting easier to solve. Climate change is not easier to solve. Like we've got to act now. And there's enough wealth coming down the road tomorrow that act now and use your power that your money has to do something good.
I would add to that as well that, maybe nobody likes to see their net worth go down, but when you look at how much you've given away and the cumulative amount, that starts to be a big number, and you can feel good about that number. And two, I personally have found it very unifying in terms of our partnership, doing something with my husband, making choices, incorporating the things he cares about with the things that I care about, having discussions, meeting with people in the space. I mean, we just enjoy it.
That's awesome.
It starts to become fun and very much gives you a sense of joy that you're referring to. But I also totally understand the challenges of getting stuck. And it can also be a challenge if you don't have a focus for your giving and you're giving lots of money away, but maybe it's in a reactive way. You're responding to asks of your friends and your business colleagues. And that hasn't been as satisfying for us. We do it because we want to support the work that other people are doing, other people care about. But when you find a focus that means a lot to you and you find charities doing great work in that space, nothing better.
I agree. And finding that focus, and I mean, you're going to get more and more engaged and you're going to become a better and better donor. Often your giving increases. That's why I think it's important to, figure out what that is. What do you care most about? Where is the giving feeling right? As you get more engaged, I think you start to give more. I think we can all give a lot more than we think we can.
Mm-hmm. I want to come back to, you mentioned your daughters, and I wanted to ask you a little bit about parenting in a wealthy home, because I know, a good portion of the book was devoted to your concerns about, will my children be spoiled and entitled? And again, lots of conversations and decisions that you took to avoid that. And I wanted to know how it all turned out. How old are your girls today? What are they doing in the world? And what's their relationship with money like?
Yeah, so they're now 24 and 26. And I wish I hadn't spent so much time worrying and angsting. And I gave too much energy to that. I do have to say, first of all, parenting's hard with or without money. And if you don't have money, that is really hard because money does make life easier. So when it came to worrying about the girls being spoiled or entitled or not ambitious, I spent so much time because I think we give way too much energy to the idea of the spoiled rich kid. It looms so large in our psyches. It looms so large in our society. I think it has an outsized role in our minds. I wish I had actually looked at our kids and looked at us as much as I looked at that image, because I was expecting that to happen. Sort of like I said earlier, I was expecting that, was wealth going to make me obnoxious? Was it going to make me greedy? No. And I honestly believe that if you, as a parent, are living your values day to day, week to week, month to month, you're really walking through the world in a way that you think you're upholding your values. Your kids are watching you. They watch what you're doing. It's not about sitting down for an hour and explaining your values. It's really every day them watching you. So if you are living your values, your kids are picking up on that. And again, I mentioned attitude and gratitude. I think this is also really important. Your kids pick up on that as well. And so when I look back and think, I spent so much time worrying about them being spoiled, and I didn't look at who they were becoming and how they were living their life, how we were living our lives, and how I was parenting. And I think if anything, like I said, parenting's hard. And so I've imparted all sorts of values to them, and one of them might be overly frugal. Even aware of it, I wish that they had felt more joy with the good fortune that they have. I'm not discounting the fact that there are other additional challenges when you have money. You have to think about things a little bit differently. But I don't think it's a foregone conclusion, very far from it, that your kids are going to be spoiled. And no one wants to raise spoiled kids, right? And so if you got to take a hard look in the mirror and ask yourself, am I living the life I want my kids to live? Or am I making the choices? Am I having the conversations? Am I doing the things that I would like to see my kids doing? If the answer is yes, then you're probably going to be okay.
Well, we're just about wrapping up. There's probably still so much I'd want to ask you. It's interesting, you mentioned about the values that you would model, but then there's also the cultural aspect and the environment they grow up in. I mean, you live in San Francisco, a lot of money in that city, a lot of old money, but a lot of new money, tech money. And some of it is spent in a way that is more consistent with that Hollywood depiction of wealth, a little more conspicuous consumption. And so I wonder about the influences of being in those circles from time to time, which I think we can't avoid, how that influenced you and your husband or your kids in that respect, because you have been very intentional.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we are all highly influenced by the people who are around us, even more than I think we realize. When I think of the girls, I think of them as students, and they surrounded themselves with other students. The people that they chose to hang out with shared their values for the most part. And I would say, especially my younger daughter, her friends tend to be the ones who don't have the money. And so that creates a separate type of issue for her where she feels embarrassed to show up as the person who has money. So she is sort of in that spot of like trying to hide it and not really feeling like she can share it. And my older daughter, I'm happy to say, has more of a mixed group of friends. And I think, one of her best friends from college also had a lot of money. And I think she was a great role model for my older daughter because she was generous with friends, and she'd, pick up drinks, or she'd take people out, or she was just always very generous in her way. She was not buying a lot of clothes or driving a fancy car, but just in the way that she showed up, I think helped my daughter also kind of feel like, it feels good to say, if dinners doesn't feel like something you can afford right now, please let me take us out. Well, I'm happy to do it. And my daughter, we had a conversation about this, and she said, I've never had a bad experience around that. That's not to say that it won't happen. I mean, it's tricky.
Well, look, we've come to the end, and this has just been fascinating. I know that I could keep talking to you anyway for hours, but before we wrap up, I typically ask my guests a couple of questions at the end, as you probably know, rapid fire questions about how they handle money. But we've been talking about that. We pretty much covered the waterfront, but maybe I'll just ask you very simply, if you could finish the sentence, to me, money is...
It's changed over the years. I might have said freedom before, but I do think I would, at this moment in my life, say power, which is interesting to me, even that I would say that, because I might have said it was shameful or embarrassing or not important, or it's not something that's going to necessarily bring you together with other human beings and create happiness for you. But there's a lot of power when it's used as a tool with purpose and with intention. And I think I'm stepping into that space right now with my money and really wanting to use it in a way that shapes the world in a way that I want to live in, which is more racially, economically equitable.
I was really inspired by Jen's story, and I hope you were too. Since 2020, Jen and David Risher have contributed millions in matching funds. They've rallied donors and nonprofits and created a community that has put over $40 million to work in charity. Now that is putting your money where your mouth is. I want to thank Jen for being my guest and for writing her book, We Need to Talk, a memoir about wealth. Thanks for listening to Serious Coin. We have more rich conversations about wealth coming up, so please subscribe so you won't miss any of them. Serious Coin is provided for your general interest only, and nothing we discuss should be taken as investment, tax, legal, or other professional advice. Always talk to a licensed professional before you make any financial decisions.